Let's get into it. Episode 697, Soul Not For Sale podcast. We got Tucker Carlson and an incredible man named Vince Everett Emerson. Now, what this gentleman is best at is breaking down the tactics that the Democrats use in order to keep black people, the black community, in line. But be sure, if you're not black and you're watching this, these are tactics they will try and use on you as well. Listen close to what he's saying. He's spot on with everything he has to say. Now, the way this conversation started, they were talking about George Floyd and the whole situation with him and his passing. And then it moved on to the mindset of someone like George Floyd and why the Democrats actually love a person like him. They love a person like him because that person needs saving. That person needs to be saved. They need to depend on someone, and that is where the Democrats step in. Listen very close. This is an amazing episode. Let's get right into it. First clip right now.
See, George Floyd is the Democratic Party's prototypical black man. These are the black men they are trying to create. So George Floyd has to be elevated. He has to be celebrated. He's perfect to them. He was poor. He was uneducated. He was a drug addict. He didn't have a job. He was down there begging and crying and asking the white people to not kill him. To a Democrat, to a white Democrat, this is the perfect black man. So he has to be elevated. Look, not a few days ago, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden celebrated hip-hop music. They had a celebration of hip-hop.
Hip-hop culture is America's culture. It is a genre. It is music and melody and rhyme. And hip-hop is also an ethos.
A music genre that calls the black man the N-word, calls women the W word and the B word, talks about misogyny, shooting police, smoking dope, selling dope, fighting, killing, acting a fool. They celebrated this genre. Why? Because this is how they see black America. They see us the same way they see George Floyd. And they have to make more of us because everywhere they rule, John F. Kennedy stood in front of the Berlin Wall in the 60s and said, if you think that communism is great, let them come to Berlin. Well, if you think that the Democratic Party is great, let them come to Detroit. Let them come to Chicago. Let them come to St. Louis. Let them come to LA, Portland, Seattle, Memphis. Anywhere where they rule, you'll see George Floyd's all over the place. And they're proud of them. In Baltimore, Maryland, they spend $21,000 per child for every child up there inside the school district. Not one school is proficient in math, science, or reading. But they keep it going every year. Why? Because they're producing George Floyd.
But
and George Floyd's vote for the Democrat Party.
But why would, so when most of us, you, me, I think all normal people look at George Floyd's life, you think this is a disaster. This guy never added anything. He took a lot in prison at least 8 times. I mean, his life was a tragedy at best. Why would you want more people like that?
Because he votes for the Democrat Party, and then he teaches his children to vote for the Democrat Party, and then these white Democrats can feel superior to him. Yeah. He can be controlled by them. Just like, think about an old slave plantation, Tucker, back in the day, how they wanted their slaves to act. Subservient, obedient, ignorant, doing what he was told. Not asking any questions, having a slave mind, being dependent on them. This is how they want black men to be in America. This is how they want the whole black community to be.
Very, very true. Now, I was so pumped about this. I even took notes on what he was saying because when it comes to why would they be propping up hip hop? Well, hip hop is basically a huge arm used to brainwash young black people. And if you don't believe me, go listen to any song. Go listen to how it's so droning on and on. It's almost hypnotic. But it's hypnotic in the sense of, listen to the melodies, but then listen to the words. And now these words are what's getting programmed into young kids. 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 25, 35, 45. It's a genre of music that plays into people's heads the lowest possible frequency, the lowest possible way of being that one person could get into. Like this gentleman said, selling dope, doing dope, sexual deviancy, you're constantly being oppressed, the man's holding you down, all of these things. And it keeps people in a state of needing a savior. That's the big thing. He said that he wants to depend on him. I'm just breaking it down more so. It keeps people in this state of needing a savior. I need to be saved by these people. I need someone to save me. Who's going to come and save me? Who's going to come and protect me? It also teaches the youth to idolize the worst. I say this all the time. I don't even have to look at the quote. I say this quote all the time. Hip hop is something that teaches black people to demonize the best of us and idolize the worst of us. 100%. You never see that. You'll never see the worst of the worst in the Jewish community being praised, or in the Chinese community, or in the white community. You never see the worst of the worst in any other community being praised except for the black community. And it's because of hip hop. It's because the worst of the worst make songs about what they do, and they make songs that are so catchy, and they're put in these chains, which is also a subliminal thing. They're put in chains, they're put in designer clothes, they're given loads of money, and then they dance in front of a screen. And what else are you going to do as a young person with nothing than idolize what you're seeing on the screen? They never do that with doctors. They never do that with engineers. Why? Because those people in the black community are seen as squares. Those people are seen as lower than somehow. They're seen as nerds. They're seen as something not to aspire to. Do you know how many times in my own life where I would be the person trying to work a job, trying to work another job, and people would look at me like I was a loser because I was working? But when I was doing illegal stuff, I was praised. People liked me. People wanted to be around me. We're the only community that does that. And what was the last thing? It keeps us unstable. Praising hip hop, praising this I need a savior mind state, it keeps us so unstable. We always need help. And who do we get the help from? If you split apart a husband and wife, if you split apart man and woman and leave the child as some latchkey kid running around, who is there to help? Well, the father's not going to help the kids because the father's not there. And the mothers can't help because she's not equipped. She wasn't ready for all this. So who's going to help? The government's going to help. So which of the parties are they going to gravitate towards the most? Well, they're going to gravitate towards the one that's constantly saying, we will give you whatever you need. None of this is your fault. None of this is your fault. It's fine. It's okay. We understand. We're going to give you, we're trying to fight for reparations. We're trying to get you this. We're trying to get you that. You need welfare? We can give you welfare. And then all of a sudden there's another party that's like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and nobody should be on welfare and people are being lazy and you need to go get a job. Nobody wants to hear that. So they go towards the easier side. Oh, man, this shit gets me pissed off. I gotta say, sorry to swear. It really does, though. Let's go on to the next part.
King Jr. in his I Have a Green speech said, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro is still not free. He said 5 times in that speech that we were not free. It turned the Declaration of Independence on its head, because in our Declaration of Independence, it said that our freedom was an unalienable right given us by God. John Locke, in his second treatise of government, said that an unalienable right is a right given from God. It is irrevocable, non-transferable, and unsellable. The government cannot touch it. It supersedes law. It supersedes the Constitution. However, King said that we was coming to government and to the white man for our right to be free. Even at the end of the speech, he said, on some certain day, we'll be free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. He said in that speech, when will we be satisfied? He said, we will never be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. That's a fancy way of saying never. And so black people heard that speech and said that we were not free here in America. And we make our children recite that speech every single year on King's birthday. And they say in that speech, the Negro is still not free. George Floyd was a slave in his mind. And the civil rights movement caused him to be a slave in his mind. And today they're still marching, 60 years later, telling black people, you're not free. Beg for reparations. Beg for affirmative action. Kill your children in the womb. cut off your child, you castrate your children. Let drag queens come into school and shake their behinds in your children's faces. Run God out of the public square. And then they end up like George Floyd. But the one thing they do consistently is they vote for the Democrat Party, and the places where George Floyd's live, they stay in absolute power.
Oh man, I love this guy. See, it's funny that they gave such a stage to Martin Luther King, right? But then guys like this, they go virtually unknown. Like, why doesn't this guy have thousands of people standing in front of him? It's because he's not preaching the victim mentality. He's not preaching what black people have been taught to think of themselves as for decades upon decades upon decades. And it works. I mean, the Democrats, they have hold of them. They get to hold these people pretty much hostage in a sense, mentally, I will say. Because how many times, well, I'm sure, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, it's happened to me, where you suggest to a black person that they're not oppressed and they get angry. They get mad. They get really mad. If you say you're not oppressed, you have the same opportunities as me, they get pissed. That's not because they're not of intelligence. They're not dumb. It's because that's what they've been taught for so long. That's what's been pushed on them for so long, that they are oppressed and that none of this is their fault. So they don't want to hear that it's their fault. And this is not all of them. I mean, look at me. I'm not like that at all. Like I pull myself up. Bootstraps. No skills. Learn skills. I'll do whatever it takes for me and my family. I've always been about that. Family, nation, God. I'm really, really about that. And so was my mom. Like, I watched her build a business. My dad, even though he wasn't a great guy, I learned after he passed away that he actually owned a record store. So he actually got to a point where he actually owned a commercial building. Like, you know what I mean? So, or leased it at least. So it's in my family. And I'm sure there's millions of black people who are also that same way. But I'm talking about the people that we see. And you know who those people are, because we see them all the time. Oh, man. And then what I have here, never satisfied with what's given. That's 100% true. It can be, they want reparations. They also want affirmative action. They expect to be given all these things. Welfare, not realizing that it actually hurts them. It actually hurts way more than it helps, because it puts you in this state. Imagine you were lifting weights and someone always helped you. And you got to the point where you're like, I want more help. I want more help, until you were standing in the corner of the gym and they're lifting the weight for you. And you're like, this is not enough. You're not getting me water. It makes them softer. If you go back to when slavery was abolished, what kind of men those were? Those men didn't look for handouts at all. They were just like, give me freedom and I'll handle the rest. And now the black community has the freedom and they're like, well, I'm oppressed. I didn't even mean to make that rhyme, but it's very true. Oh, man. All right, let's move on. All right, so the next thing here. I love this guy. I'm buying this guy's book right after I get off of this video.
Explanation. So you're saying that the Democratic Party as an organization intentionally degrades black people to keep them compliant and obedient.
Oh, yes. In my book, Crime Inc., I talk about one of the main things they do, like the mafia and organized crime. They humiliate black people. They demoralize them. It's a Marxist construct. They demoralize their people. They beat them down. They tell them that they're victims. Well, it was Martin Luther King Jr. that said, they tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, how can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you're bootless? You know, he told us we were bootless. You know, you have black preachers, and you know about my iron triangle, the black preacher, the black politician, the black civil rights worker. They go into the black community. Consistently, you're a victim. You're oppressed. The country hates you. Well, see, I look at them and I say, I'm a black man, but I cannot be oppressed. You know why? Because I'm a child of God. I'm an heir of Jesus Christ. I cannot be a victim. Why? Because I'm an heir of Jesus Christ. I'm a child of God. I cannot be a victim. See, they tell these people to go against their religion and their basic ideology, because most black men say they're Christians, right? But then they walk around saying, I'm oppressed. I'm a victim. I'm afraid. 365 times in our Bible, they tell us to fear not. Yet they walk around saying they're afraid in the United States of America. LeBron James said he's afraid. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says he's afraid. Kaepernick said he's afraid. Well, I'm a black man in America, and I'm not afraid of a damn thing. I don't ask for permission in my own house. America is my home. So as they walk around here crying, talking about, I'm frightened, I'm afraid, I can't make it, please help me, I tell them they stink in my nostrils. They're an affront to God. The flip side of white male intimidation during the civil rights was also black male cowardice.
Hard words to hear. Hard words to hear. If you are African American, or even if you're of the poor class and you feel like, man, I don't have a fair shake, it's hard to hear stuff like that, but it's true. And the quicker you get it into your head and can move on, the much better off you'll be. Believe me. I just hit 1 year sober. I've had no skills. I've had to pull myself up by the bootstraps. And do you know what kind of Orwellian mindset you have to get a community into to convince them while they have their boots? Because when you talk about that quote about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that means taking what you have and taking that opportunity and making something of it. Do you know how crazy it is to convince a community that they have no opportunities, that they have no boots when they actually do? That's crazy. And this is coming from somebody who, I didn't have anything. I had nothing. No skills at all. And I made something happen. And it's not even just this channel and the clothing company. I've made companies. I've had a cleaning company where I was a person who cleaned toilets and cleaned this and cleaned that. And I built the company up and I sold it. Like, you can do things. You can. Think about it. I'm talking about a cleaning company. I took the opportunity. I'm like, what can I do? Well, I can sweat. I can work for 8 hours and sweat. Okay, I'll do that. Let's see what comes of it. I'm telling you, man, you can do things. Then now, to get into what he said about the humiliation, you have to think about, maybe you're not understanding when he says that they humiliate, right? When you're constantly shown images of cops killing black people, that's humiliation. That humiliates you. They're putting you in that state by showing you that over and over and over again. They could show you on the news over and over again, black people just graduating from university. They could do that. They could just show you black scientists every single day. They could be like, here's the black 6 o'clock news. Here you go. Here's 6 guys graduating from Harvard. Look at them. They're black. You can do it too. They could just do that over and over again, but they don't. They choose to show you cops beating up black people. That's humiliation. They're reminding you that you're lower than and you're oppressed all the time. That's humiliation. They're reminding you of slavery all the time and that you should get reparations. That's humiliation. They're showing you idols that are afraid. LeBron James, he brought up Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Colin Kaepernick, all of these people who are millionaires who are telling you, I'm afraid as a black person. That's humiliation. They're showing you even the guys at the very top are still afraid like I am, so this will never go away. This is something that can never go away ever. It's with me for life. That's humiliation, and that's programming you to be hopeless. You know what I mean? Oh, man. I love this, but I hate it at the same time. Let's get into this last part here. This is a very interesting part. He's making a direct parallel here, and I think he's so on point with this parallel. And a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but he gets right into it. Let's go.
Use BLM as a domestic militia in the last presidential cycle 2020 to defeat Donald Trump. Do you expect something like that to happen again?
Well, you see how they use the same tactics as Iran. Iran has Hezbollah and Hamas as their militias. And the Democratic Party uses BLM and Antifa as theirs, throwing the rock and hiding the hand. Of course they're going to do it. They've always done it. Even at the beginning, they used the Ku Klux Klan for the military reign. Now they're using BLM, they're using Antifa, they're using NAACP, and they're their suicide bombers. They're their shock troops. They're their brown shirts. They're their street soldiers. And they're going to go out there, and I guarantee you, Tucker, they're going to look over all the black-on-black violence. They're going to look over all the black men killing black men. They're going to look over all the snatch and grabs and all the burning and all the fighting and looting and acting the fool. And they're going to find one crazy white cop that's going to do something to some crazy black man, and then they're going to try to burn this country down for it. That's their plan. That's their template. I hope America's ready for it because it's coming. And it always works for them. It always works because the press and everybody's just waiting. Oh, they're on the starting line just waiting for it. And as soon as they find that golden kill, watch them go crazy with it. BLM is going to start getting their money from the Democrat Party because that's who they get it from. The same way that Hamas gets their money from Iran. BLM gets their money from the Democrat Party. And BLM does not stand for Black Lives Matter. It stands for burn, loot, and murder.
Oh, man. Love this guy. Love this guy. I'm telling you. Whew. And he's right. He's right. Listen. I know it's a weird thing, right? But go look in the past and what the KKK used to do. And then look at what BLM did. I'm telling you, go and look those two things at what they did back in the day when they were first formulated by the Democratic Party. Go look into what they used to do and go look into what BLM did and see if you don't see the exact same thing. It is wild. And they would focus on certain people. And you know what's funny? When I make those comparisons, you're like, that's crazy. Because one was focused on justice and the other was focused on racism and destruction. Well, guess what? You know how many black communities got messed up by what BLM did? Think about that. How many black businesses? Think about that. I'm telling you, go look those two things up. You will see parallels between those two. And I also think he's correct about this because there are governments will always have something, an organization, a civil organization of some kind that will do the things that they can't be seen doing. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's true. Just look into it. I'm telling you. Now, the last thing that he has to say is a beautiful thing, and I kept it last for a reason because this is the thing that every single person needs to hear, and they really need to understand it. Because I've said it before, America's the only place that's taught to be ashamed of everything, their whole history. No other places. There's other places that have had slavery. No other place that has had slavery exist in its society has been taught to be ashamed of it. No other place has tried to push the acknowledgement on the people who were slaves that they were slaves over and over again, every single generation. It's wild. No other place teaches white people to be ashamed of being white and teaches black people at the exact same time to be ashamed of being black. No other place does it. I'm telling you. So this is what we're going to end it on right here. Let's go.
I said before, it is a privilege to be white, but it's also a privilege to be black. And it's a privilege to be an American. And it's really a privilege to be a Christian in the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of this earth. And they're not.
And that's it. That's just what I want to end it on. There is a privilege in being white, but there's also a privilege in being black. And there's also a privilege in being an American. That's it. Like it if you haven't liked it already. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And other than that, I'm out.